And now we just have a box with a macro knob. Now, I have a one knob. Hey, it's me, the same guy from the video that you're about to watch, but from the future. And I just wanted to come here and let you know that I talked for quite a bit at the beginning of this, just giving my thoughts about the process that was going to occur. And if you want to skip ahead to the creation portion and skip over all of the foundational talking points, you can skip right here to this time code. Thank you very much for watching. I wanted to come today to make a tutorial about something that I saw that I thought was really cool. And it's like a sample selector, essentially. It's a one knob kick and snare selector. So one of the things that I talk about that I think is like extremely instrumental in like the ability to generate music is to have to just make the process as easy as possible. The faster you can make music, the more music you can make, and you get good by making music. So if you can streamline the process of creating the music, then you can get better faster just simply because you are generating more music. And so you're practicing those skills more often, and you learn at a much higher rate that way. So this kick and snare selector is something that I think is going to help streamline the process of creating music. ill.Gates is doing I'm not sure if he still does them, but with his producer dojo, he was doing like a Wednesday stream where he would just Wednesday, you would just get a link to like a Zoom meeting, and he would just talk about, he would do this, but, live on Zoom. So I kind of saw him playing with it one of these streams, and I thought I'd reverse engineer it. It's not super hard. It kind of does require a little bit of understanding of the plugin, but once you understand how the plugin works, it's pretty easy to see how it was operating and just kind of deconstruct it. So I want to go through that because it's fucking really nifty. It's just nifty, and it makes starting a track. I don't want to dig through samples for a very long time. I want to sit down and I want to start making music. So anyway, that's a lot of talk to get to this point. Let's check it out real quick. Let's see what it's doing. So you see here, there's a knob. It says kick selector. If I play a note, you see, one knob, kick selector. Let's go to snare. One knob snare selector. It's super dope. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and create one from scratch. So the first thing I'm going to do, you see I already have it. Control F. Remember Control F. That's another one of those streamline things. Control F. Sampler. I had it pulled up, but I wanted to do it just so that I could remind you to use Control F as much as possible. Once I have the sampler, I'm going to Control G to group it. Control G is group. So once I have it in a group, I have access to the panning, the volume, the on or off, and the solo. And then I also have access to macro knobs, which we will be using later. So first thing I want to do is open up the zone here. And then I want to come over here where it says selector. Click on that. Once you come to the selector, there's a couple things that I want to demonstrate about the selector. I dropped a kick in here. It's dropped this bar into the selector area. And if you notice, it's very similar to the chain selector here. You see, I can drag through here. So I feel like you can kind of get the idea. Whoops, hide. You can kind of get the idea of what I'm going for here. I'm going to bring in another kick here. Now you'll see I have them stacked on top of each other. If I split them like this, let's say I do this and do this. as I drag the selector, you see? I feel like you're starting to get what's happening. There's a couple things that you can do. Let's say that you only have like 10 or 11 kicks, however many kicks, that you just are in like your main rotation. You can drop them in here so you have 10 kicks. If I right click anywhere inside of this selector area, I can select the option to distribute ranges equally. And that will just, you see how it's divided that? Now here's what I want to do. I want to map this chain selector here to the macro knob, the sample selector rather. And now you can see as I turn the knob, the one thing I do not like about this particular way of distributing the ranges for the macro selector is that if you notice, it's still from 0 to 127. So anywhere from like 0 to where 10 or 11 is all going to be sample 1. A more tedious way to do things, but in my opinion, like a more well-organized way to do things would be to drag each of the samples down to one width. So if you notice, this last one lands on 9. If I click the map button, I can set the minimum range to 0 and the maximum range to 9. Whoops. To 9. And now each one is 1, you see? So now I'm only scrolling through, and now you can immediately know how many samples or like what number sample you're on, as opposed to having them all dividing up the total of 128 kind of makes it hard, because if you're looking at 15, you're like, oh, is this the 3rd sample or the 5th sample? If you make each one of them an individual number, then you know exactly where you're at. If you notice something on the macro knob, the minimum value is 0, the maximum value is 127, which gives a total value of 128, which means that you can have 128 different samples in here. So you might not pack it full of 128. If you look at my main snare selector, I've got 10 samples, 0 to 9. So like as I make new snares, as I make new kicks, I will add them to my kick selector or my snare selector and then just grow my library. And the goal is to eventually grow it to 128. But I prefer to do like, 9 or 10. That's how many I have currently that I just rotate between. And when I get bored with those, I'll add another one, make another one, So, but let's max it out, right? It has room for 128 samples. Let's add 128 samples. Boom. Now again, since there are 128, when we distribute the ranges equally rather, it's going to make them all one individual width. So that's very nice. I don't have to worry about like dragging them all and shrinking them all. So here's the thing that you need to pay attention to. Scale. If you watched my tutorial about drum processing, when I was doing my kick and my snare in MIDI, I considered reducing the scale to 0% before deciding on leaving it at 100%. But I didn't really explain what scale did. I just kind of glossed over it very quickly. So let me take the time right now to explain what scale does. At scale 100%, each note, like each half step on the keyboard, corresponds to 100% of a half step. Does that make sense? So it's like a 1-to-1 ratio. As I move up the keyboard, it moves up by 1/2 step every time. At scale 50, if I were to move up 2 steps, now since it is 50%, this moving up 2 steps has acted like moving up by 1. At negative 100, I will move up and it will move down at a 1 to -1 ratio. But here's why this is important. At scale 0, every note is the same note. So I like to have it here because if you notice, I have a 49 key keyboard, so I don't always want to have to go to middle C to play. Hey, it's me again, the guy from the video you're watching, except from the future. And it just occurred to me that I didn't demonstrate how to adjust the scale of all of the files at once. If I select all my files here, if I come to the top and then I hold Shift and select the bottom one, you'll notice I now have all of my samples selected. When I bring them and drop them in, all of the scales will be set to 100 by default. And if I click on one to change the scale, I can only change one scale at a time. And that's very tedious, especially if you have 128 samples. So if I click the first sample here, and I scroll all the way to the bottom and I hold Shift, and I click the last sample, now I can come here and click where it says scale and hit 0, and it will change the scale of all of my samples to 0. Thank you very much for taking this little time travel departure with me to show you how to do that. And let's get back to the video. I might want to have like one hand on my mouse here and then one hand, and I'm just like leaned back and I'm scrolling the knob here, right? So it's nice to have the scale at 0%. So here are a couple of things when you're dropping samples into the sampler. I have set mine by default to have the filter off, to have volume to velocity set to 0%, volume at -6 decibels, voices to 1, and retrigger on. I've just come and set all of these settings here. You can't set the scale until you drop a sample in. Then you can set the scale. But you can come beforehand and turn the filter off, adjust your settings here, your ADSR envelope if you want, your volume, your velocity. So I've went ahead and did that. Let's collapse the zone here. We will turn this off. And now we just have a box with a macro knob. Now, I have a 1 knob. There is one thing that you might want to add here. Create chain. I showed you last time that I use a volume shaper to do my side chaining. So I can go ahead and add, again, an external instrument here. Boom. And we can send it to my shaper box sidechain for my kick. And then we can collapse these two. You know, maybe let's color it red. That's the color I like to have my kick. So we'll go ahead and color it the same. And then, boom. Now we have a kick selector. Do literally the same exact thing, but with snares. And guess what? You have a snare selector. It's like a cheat code. You know, just do everything that you just did, but instead of putting kicks, put snares. And it's a whole different thing. You know, you got a 2-for-1 this time. You're welcome. 2 tutorials in 1. I think that might be it on this one. Hey, it's me again, the guy from the video that you're watching, but from the future. And I realized while I was editing that I didn't demonstrate how to save your kick selector once you're done making it. So we've got all of our kicks in here, all 128. Let's go ahead and collapse the zone. Let's go ahead and collapse this menu and collapse this menu now. We have a single box and we want to save that for later use. if you come up here and click this disk icon right here, you can save it as Kick Selector Tutorial. Hit enter. Now if I Control-Shift-T to drop a MIDI track in there, I can drag and drop my kick selector. And boom, there you go. Thank you for taking this excursion into the future with me. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the video. Yeah, I think this is going to be it. This was a super short one compared to the last one. Thank you again for tuning in. If you have any ideas or you have any tutorials that you specifically want, let me know, because I'm just kind of like currently making tutorials for things that I think that people would not have considered. I don't want to like make double, you know, there's tutorials for everything on YouTube. So I want to try to make a tutorial about things that there aren't as many tutorials for. So if you have an idea like that, or like, oh, I wish I had a tutorial on how to do this or how to do that, let me know and I will make that, you know, so that I can fill in the gaps of the rest and just make the YouTube tutorial scene more complete instead of like redundant and flooded with same type of stuff. You know what I mean? So that's my goal with these. Anyway, thank you again for tuning in, and I'm gonna come with another one soon. Thank you so much. Bye.